Hey guys, All in Crypto here, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another YouTube video. It is the 30th of the 1st, 2023. It is a Monday. We're going to be starting the week off by looking at the week ahead. We've given somewhat of a positive outlook for the cryptocurrency markets over the next 3 to 6 months, albeit if the conditions stay the same. And we're going to be elaborating a little bit on that in this video, but we're really going to start things off by looking at the week ahead and looking at some of the economic data that's going to be coming to us. Really starting from tomorrow, we've got lots of GDP figures coming out. We're going to talk about that because we had the GDP figures for Q4 for the US. So if we have GDP figures, for example, for the euro, well, what does this mean for the dollar? We did an absolutely fantastic interview with Mr. Francis Hunt, who goes by the Market Sniper and the Crypto Sniper, and of course the Reset Sniper. And we spent quite a long time during this video talking about the dollar, talking about its role in relation to Bitcoin, and everything sort of associated with it, and the fact that actually, you know, a large part of what happens next for crypto and risk on is dependent on the dollar. And we gave a number of scenarios for that. That interview is absolutely well worth a watch. We didn't just get into the dollar and Bitcoin. We got into things like Ethereum dominance, you know, gold, silver, stocks, you name it. It was a really good sort of broad market overview. So a lot of the data is really going to sort of play on some of this. And we know that the Dixie is currently down. But we've got a number of other things, like we've got rate hikes coming up, and so on and so forth. And we've also still got, it's company earnings season, ladies and gentlemen. I think last week we had about 20% of the SPY's earnings coming out. I think most of that would have already been priced in. But we do still have, I think starting from tomorrow, some pretty big companies ahead of us like Facebook and so on and so forth. So we will cover all that, and then we'll get into a little bit of technical analysis. You know, the market, the cryptocurrency market's having a bit of a pullback at the moment. Very natural, but we're not just going to be looking at Bitcoin against the US dollar. We're going to pull up Bitcoin against the SPY, the S&P, and also we will look at the Dixie on its own sort of merit. I do think that the SPY, in my opinion, actually looks pretty good. The S&P, the Dow, you know, the NASDAQ. And if we compare Bitcoin with the SPY, Bitcoin actually looks better against the SPY than the SPY against the US dollar. So there's something to be said there. So let's get into it, guys. I want to start off with the economic data that we have coming forwards. I'm going to be doing a video for my Patreons later where we're going to get into a number of things and actually probably do a little bit of looking into China. China actually plays a substantial role in the world economy, and I think that there's a little bit of the fact that they're reopening baked into why I'm potentially have a lot more of a positive outlook on the markets being sort of max bear, you know, last year. At the moment than I previously have. I think they're going to be a huge pool of liquidity that with them reopening it is going to find its way into the sort of individual factions of a market. But anyway, we got Monday. So today we've got the Japanese unemployment rate. So not particularly massive. Obviously the JPY crosses like the dollar are going to be important. Tuesday, we've got the Chinese Purchasing Manager Index. So this might be interesting. We've got German GDP. We've got Eurozone GDP, we've got German CPI, the US Chicago PMI, and US consumer confidence. So lots and lots of data going on there. The big one for me really watching is the Eurozone GDP for Q4. Remember, the US GDP actually rose, and this has essentially they're expecting to see a decline in growth and only a rise of a 1.1 in opposition with the 2.9 that we saw from the US. However, this came over estimates. Eurozone's potentially likely. So the real thing is what's going to happen to the dollar. You've really got to be honed in to the dollar and what it's doing, because if this sees some upside, you're going to see downside for risk and vice versa. However, the dollar's at this kind of critical point. Going back to that video that I referenced to that I did with Francis, spoke about a number of downside targets and a number of scenarios forward for the dollar, and watching for those scenarios and how they're going to play out, I think is going to be very, very important for risk on. Certainly crypto, which is a sort of higher beta of everything. But I actually think crypto looks really good. You know, if I'm going to give a opinion on this, I think the pullbacks or the pullback that we may get this week, and I think a lot of what's happening right now is people are just taking risk off the table because of all the things that are going on this week, in my opinion, are going to be for buying. You know, we're not calling a bottom necessarily here. Maybe it is. then happy days, we'd have bought it. But we haven't gone all into the market. Back when we discussed it as a sort of group, as a Patreon on the 5th, just simply because there's a lot of sketchiness sort of around, and a lot of risk still out there that we're looking to capitalize on if it ever comes to fruition. But we also don't want to be sidelined, having been sidelined for sort of last year. So lots of this going on. Again, Dixie's really going to be the main thing to watch and how all this interacts with it. On Wednesday, we've got we've essentially got a survey for China. We've got the Eurozone CPI, so inflation. Okay, inflation's such a driver, and it needs to be watched. If you're getting decrease in inflation again, markets are going to enjoy that. They're going to see this as sort of a dovish momentum, which is ultimately going to filter through, and you're likely going to see appreciation in the market, certainly the Euro stock market, the DAX, things like this potentially. We've got the US ADP report. So this is private payrolls, just a way to sort of measure up the economy. That's looking for a slight private rise in payrolls, but down from last month's. We've got the US ISM MFG PMI, and then we've got the EU crude oil, or US EIA crude oil. And then the big one is at 7 p.m. UK time. We've got the Fed's rate decision, and they're expected to rise from the current 4.5 where they're at to 4.75. So a 25 basis point rate hike. And this is, we've expected this lowering and this kind of easing of how aggressive they're being based on the 2-year US government bond yield. So this is going to be interesting. If you get this 25 basis points, markets will probably enjoy that. If you don't, I think markets have largely already priced this in, and it's a given. But if they did shock the markets, which I don't think is likely, I think they'll go over 25 basis points. If they shock the market, I think it would be quite turbulent. Then you've got the following day, the Bank of England rate decision. You've got them expected to do a 50 basis points, and then you've got the ECB also looking to do a 25 basis points. So a big week for data. Then we've got the US non-farm payroll. This is going to be interesting. This is how they kind of weigh up the economy. Good payroll number. Markets will probably, do okay, and this soft landing narrative will sort of come back into shift. Bad one, then we'll see what happens. It's kind of like a catch-22 with the non-farm payroll, because you could take good points and bad points from both. Then we've got the US non-manufacturing PMI. So there's lots of data going on. This is why I think markets are ultimately having this bit of a pullback going into this week. It's quite obvious and logical. Altcoins have had a substantial and a really significant rally. We were looking at things like Ethereum, and looking for that continued upside. But we'll see. We still ultimately have a good outlook on markets. We think that pullbacks that take place are largely going to be for buying, potentially, certainly for people that are still sidelined and maybe missed out on this, expecting your 2-3Ks or sorry, not 2-3Ks, 11, 12, sort of 15K. Again, on the 5th, we did sort of take a stance and say, look, well, on the 1st of the month, we said we're not actually bearish anymore. On the 5th, we spoke about it as a group, and then, of course, we've implemented and actually dipped our toes back in markets since then, just to be totally transparent. But all this data, again, is really going to affect the dollar, and the dollar's just it's the main part of the story. And it's been really bad. It's been really weak. I think there's a number of things going on. Got the debt ceiling, of course, which isn't helping it. They are obviously going to raise that. I can't believe I saw people actually talking about they were going to allow the US to default. I mean, why would they do that when they can just print? The stock market is at a very, very sort of critical level. But you could kind of class the stock market as having broken out, actually, at this point. I've got a not so bad outlook on the stock market actually moving forwards. And if I think that maybe you're going to get some sort of a break for the stock market and this soft landing narrative on this lower inflation comes into focus, then Bitcoin against the stock market, in my opinion, looks pretty good. And you're actually, when you're comparing Bitcoin with the stock market or the S&P in this example, the SPX, it looks like it's going to outperform the SPYs. If the SPYs having a good time, what is potentially Bitcoin and crypto going to do as a sort of higher beta? And it's natural that we got this sort of increase in price for Bitcoin, because we know what's been driving the markets. You can see actually Bitcoin's doing better against the SPY than it is the US dollar. You know, you can see it's made a lot more progression in opposition and looked a lot stronger than it has the US dollar. So again, confidence that it's likely going to do better than the SPY. And the SPY actually looks pretty good. Maybe it has a pullback going into this week. Now that you've broken this sort of area, very common that on a break you'll get a retest. You've not quite had it yet. We'll see what happens. But I do think Bitcoin's going to do pretty damn well. But just again to sort of bring in the sort of broad overview of everything. Let's go back to the weekly. You're going to have to forgive me, guys. Like I say, I'm away currently, so not got my usual setup. Just to bring up and be boring. Fed funds. It's been whatever I was trying to do there. You know, you can also see that rates are getting priced out of the market at this point. You know, why markets rallying? Well, it's all to do with sort of economic conditions. You'll notice Bitcoin was actually very much a first mover in terms of selling off and being sensitive to the sort of macro environment. My guess is, bet that, you know, if it wasn't for FTX, it may have already led this. So if we didn't get the FTX crash, Bitcoin would have likely gone higher in the same manner that the stock market. And this is all on the back of the weak dollar. You could put the dollar up here, and the rally for the stock market really started here. This is round about the time period where the dollar was weak. But then bringing that 360 back round to where we are with all this economic data, you've got to watch the dollar and what it does. If it goes for lower prices, crypto and risk on is going to continue to go up. If it goes for higher price and see some sort of a pullback, then you're going to get more of a deeper sustained pullback for crypto. But I think ultimately it's eventually going to set up for that sort of more mid-term, I would say 3 to 6 months continuation. That's all I've got for you in this video, guys. If you have enjoyed this content, a like is always greatly appreciated. So is a comment. Again, I'm away currently. I will be back potentially on next Monday, but I will keep these daily market updates going. And I also have a number of interviews with a number of project founders that I will be releasing this week for you guys. All I've got for you guys, have an amazing Monday, and I'll catch you all in the next YouTube video. Thanks a lot for watching.